Popular Christian apologist David Wood recently debated popular agnostic Alex O'Connor on did Jesus claim to be God. I'm going to be talking about 5 takeaways in today's video, and we can talk about who won the debate at the end. So this video is going to be broken down into what I liked about both of their approaches. Then I'm going to talk about what both of them could do better. Then I'm going to talk about what both of them did well. Then we're going to talk about the best part of the debate, and we'll wrap up, like I mentioned a moment ago, about winning a debate, etc., and all that good stuff. So firstly, the approaches. This was, in my opinion, very great because both of them, David Wood and Alex O'Connor, both come from polarizing positions. And the reason why this is so good is because normally you may have a debate where people are coming from like very close places and you can get lost in the weeds in those sorts of debates. Both of them came from very contrasting positions, and it was a good offensive strategy from both of them. And this really, in my opinion, is a way to showcase who has the stronger, the better, more resilient argument. So let me start with Alex O'Connor. What I liked about his approach was that he founded his debate strategy on the Gospel of John.
I'm not trying to make a point out of that. Jesus is going to do that for me as we turn to what I think is the most important Christological gospel of the 4, which is of course John's gospel.
And the reason he did this was because his mindset was, or this is what I believe his mindset was anyway, was that, look, if I can present John's gospel, which most people, at least the view by most people, like on just a popular level, is that John's gospel account is the clearest gospel which presents Jesus as God, as divine, etc. So Alex's strategy was, if I can take down John's gospel, that will basically make a huge dent in this argument. Just to kind of give you some additional detail, a lot of people, the scholarly view, or popular view anyway from a lot of people, is that over time, you've got Matthew and Mark and Luke, and then you've got John's gospel, and John's gospel is, there's basically this development where Jesus wasn't claiming to be God or presented as God in the earlier gospels. And then when we get to the last written gospel, John, that's when it takes some huge development. That gives you some insights into why Alex O'Connor may have been going for John's gospel. He's going right to the head of the snake, so to speak, because if he can take the head of the snake off, then it'll be easier for him to really just dismantle everything else. Because from a lot of people's perspectives, they view it as, if you can take out John, then there's really nothing else in the other gospels which has most of what Jesus says to combat this argument. This is why what David Wood did in his, like, the foundation of his argument, I liked his approach, because he, as I'm calling it, started not even with the Gospels, he started before the Gospels.
Here in my opening statement, I'm going to briefly discuss the forgotten Jewish idea that's most relevant for understanding how Jesus claimed to be God. And then I'll show how this forgotten Jewish idea illuminates various passages in the New Testament. Some of you are familiar with the early Jewish belief in the 2 powers in heaven. Alan Siegel, a Jewish scholar, drew attention to this in his 1977 book, 2 Powers in Heaven.
He laid out this framework of what's popularly known as the 2 powers in heaven. This 2 powers in heaven's belief was around circulating in Jewish circles before Christianity even existed. So by David presenting this 2 powers in heaven, which is basically the Jewish belief, not Greek philosophy, which some people mistake it for, this Jewish belief was that, going back to the Old Testament passages, there was God, who we know as the Father, but God the Father also had a son who's also called Wisdom, or the Angel of the Lord. When we think about it from a Christian perspective, we can call Jesus Wisdom. The New Testament calls him that. We can call him the Son. Obviously, he calls himself that, etc. And this is why it was such a good strategy for David Wood to use, in my opinion, because if he can highlight this key doctrine, which, if you look into the research, maybe we'll talk about that more later on in today's video. This is a solid belief that was mainstream before the time of Christianity. So with that sort of understanding, that can help you look at the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, in a completely different light. This is why I say it was polar opposites, because Alex is going to the latest gospel. David is setting this up from before the Gospels. So once you understand this context of that time, when you read the Gospels, it's so much easier for you to understand, okay, cool, this is Jesus claiming to be God, etc. It's kind of like when you're trying to learn something and there's just some small thing missing, And then when you learn this small thing, it just makes everything much more clearer. That's what understanding this two powers in heaven doctrine can help you do when it comes to reading the Gospels and seeing some of the clear ways that Jesus is claiming to be God in the Gospels. This is why I say I like both of the approaches, because Alex is taking a very offensive approach, going, like I said, to the head of the snake, and David Wood is presenting this stuff, founding in this two powers theology, which helps you understand what Jesus is doing. Now let's talk about what both could have done better or could have done even more on to make it even more conclusive for the points they were actually making. For David, what I would suggest is if David honed in more on what Jesus actually says in the Gospels, I think that would have helped his argument even more. Why am I saying this? Because this is where debates can get tricky, and I'm going to talk about this later on in the video as well. So really and truly, debates can be won or lost based on the framing, the careful framing of the debate title. So from my understanding, the debate title is, did Jesus claim to be God? And I'm going to talk about that more when we get onto what I think Alex could have done better as well. But if David spent more time focusing on particular verses in the Gospels, particular verses which Jesus was speaking about, saying himself, that would have made it even more effective, because Alex would have had to deal specifically with those passages, which there's some of that in the debate when you watch it, if you haven't watched it already, but it would have been even more conclusive. On the top of that, Alex isn't a Bible scholar or anything along those lines, so it would have been easier for him to present the case and to break down these things, and it would have been harder for Alex to engage with those things. David basically had an approach where it was focus on the Gospels and things that Jesus said, but then also at the same time, he spent some time in his debate talking about the epistles, things written by Paul or written by other people in the New Testament, which weren't specifically quoting things Jesus said. And my point is to say, not that you can't go out of the Gospels to see if Jesus claimed to be God. What David did when he was going out to this passage was effective. I just wouldn't have spent as much time on that in a particular argument. On the flip side, what Alex could have done better is pin David down more on what Jesus actually said in claiming to be God. Because, like I said, to my understanding, the debate title is, did Jesus claim to be God? So the fundamental argument should be coming from Jesus's words, what he says, and also his deeds, what he does. Because if Jesus is doing things which only God does, i.e. creating the world, for example, or if Jesus is saying things which only God says or is supposed to say, so imagine if Jesus is taking passages in the Old Testament where God's speaking and he's applying them to himself. Those are things which only God should say. If Alex pinned David down to things which Jesus was saying and doing, and only those things, it may have been even better for him in the debate. But then at the same time, like I just mentioned, because he's not a Bible scholar, he may have not wanted to whittle so deeply down into particular topics which he's not necessarily a specialist in. Now let's talk about what both of them did well. I'm just going to mention debate etiquette, and I don't mean, oh, they were both dressed in suits, which is obviously good, but they are both seasoned debaters in many respects, so they carry themselves well in the debate. They're sticking to format. There's no like shouting or insulting or loud talking, which are things, believe it or not, which happen in debates at times. So the way they carry themselves from start to the finish was good. You can tell that they're decent debaters by the fact that they both came ready with jokes to tell at the start, which is one of those like debate tactics that people use.
I'd like to thank Ruslan for arranging this conference and this debate, one of many awesome debates taking place in 2025, pitting heroes against villains. I won't say who the villain is in this debate. I'll let all you lovely Christians judge that for yourselves.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. Or as we say in England, assalamu alaikum.
Now specifically what both of them did well was, for David Wood, I liked his rebuttal rounds. David used the rebuttal rounds to really engage with the questions and the arguments that Alex was presenting in his when he was speaking. And it's important as a Christian, when we are engaging in conversations with people who are not Christians or even fellow Christians, when we're having dialogues and arguments about particular topics, it's important to be able to engage with the arguments that people are presenting against your position. And I think David did this very well in the rebuttal rounds and also leading into the cross-examination and the Q&A section as well. When you get to rebut the argument, when you're engaging with arguments which are made against your point, this is a really crucial time in a dialogue or in a debate, because this is where people really get to see how you can engage on the spot to questioning or reasoning which is happening in real time. Now, one of the things which Alex did very well was the questions he asks. And what I believe from the content I've seen from Alex is he's really good at asking questions in a specific way which can help him prove his points or prove his arguments. Even if you think about when Alex is speaking in his rebuttal rounds, or when we get into cross-examination and those different parts of the debate, the questions he asks are powerful. And when you can ask a powerful question, this is how you can win a debate, unless you are able to engage with those powerful questions in a way which is sufficient to deal with those questions. This is why those questions from Alex in the debate were really good. But also, like I said, the rebuttal round from David was really good as well. Or more the rebuttal rounds and also the cross-examination as well. Now let's talk about the best part of the debate. And for me, the best parts of debates are always the cross-examination. And if you want to add into that, the Q&A, which normally comes after cross-examination. And this is what, like, I go back and forth. Like, I like watching debates, but I'm not really the biggest fan of the debate structure as a whole. And don't be surprised, because loads of people think like this as well. Why? Is because I'll talk about this more later on, but most people know that debating isn't necessarily about who has the better arguments. Debating can really quickly turn into a competition, a performance. And when you're really interested in digging for truth, when you're really interested in whittling down to the strongest arguments, that's not always going to come up in a debate. But when we get to a cross-examination, this is where both parties are able to engage. And this is why I would always prefer a dialogue over a debate, because with a dialogue, you can have a conversation and you can present back and forth. What do you think about this? Or what about that, etc.? And that back and forth creates just, like, the best way to say it is it creates like a special energy, a special interaction, which really drills down. When two people are opening up with their opening statements and they're making their case, and then they go into rebuttals, it's almost like it's so easy to speak past each other. But when you get to a cross-examination, if both people are engaging properly, like they were in this cross-examination, it's easy for them to mesh and really to start to understand whose arguments are holding up to the scrutiny best. Let's talk about who won the debate. I want you to let me know who you think won the debate in the comment section below. I only watched this debate once on double speed and I wasn't scoring it like that. So I'm not going to say this person won or that person won. But let's just say from a Christian perspective, I believe David Wood did really well. But like I mentioned earlier, this whole thing about winning debates, and this is what you need to realize, because for some people, they watch a debate between two people and they're like, well, whoever wins, this is the person, or whoever wins, this is the belief I'm going to follow. But what you need to realize about a debate is you can win a debate even though you have the losing arguments. And this is where presentation, communication, charisma, confidence, and intellect, all these things play a big part. If you can be someone with a very bad, terrible idea, but still communicate it in a way which is effective and garners the belief. How many times have I made videos engaging with atheists or Muslims or Hebrew Israelites on this channel, or rabbis who sound so confident, but when you slow what they're saying down, when you actually engage with the argument, you see that it's not really a winning argument. It's not really a winning debate. It's something which can get torn to shreds very quickly in many scenarios. So you can obviously have fun deciding who's winning the debate if you want to score a debate like that. But really and truly, you should be thinking about, when you're watching a debate, whose arguments are standing up to the most scrutiny, whose arguments are strong. And that's the best thing you should take away from a debate. Not necessarily, well, this person won or that person won, and therefore that means this person's view is right, etc. So hopefully this video helped you some of the things you should look for when people are debating. And hopefully that can help you strengthen your faith in Christianity as well, based on some of the things I said. God bless, and I'll see you on the next video.